is Baseball Tonight, the podcast.
Thanks for listening. I'm Buster Olney, and this is the Baseball Tonight podcast for Wednesday, July 9th, 2014. On this date in baseball history, in 2011, Derek Jeter, the Yankees, collected hit number 3,000 in his career. He was the 28th player to get number 3,000, and it came off David Price. Here's the call from Michael Kay.
3-2. That one's drilled deep to left field. Going back, George, looking up. See ya! 3,000. History with an exclamation point. Oh, what a way to join the 3,000 hit club. Derek Jeter has done it in grand style.
It was a grand style because, of course, it was a home run. Now, recently, Derek Jeter tied Lou Gehrig's career doubles record in Yankees history, and the pitcher was David Price. And when he allowed this, he just shook his head, and you could see him almost saying out loud, boy, I can't believe I'm part of history again for Derek Jeter. Questions are being raised whether a kryptonite has been found for one all-star pitcher. The home run derby teams were named, and Tim Kurkjian will discuss that. And we'll hear from Joba Chamberlain about his shift to the Detroit Tigers. Let's get to the headlines.
The first pitch.
The Cleveland Indians came from behind to beat the Yankees and Masahiro Tanaka, and of course there are now questions being raised about whether Tanaka is being figured out by hitters all around baseball. After last night's game, Joe Girardi talked about Tanaka's performance.
A couple runs he gave up. He made some good pitches, and Brantley hit a couple good pitches, but then he kind of hung a slider to Swish, and he left a fastball over the middle to Brantley later in the game. I mean, it happens. We know he's not going to be perfect. We understand that. I mean, we know how good he's been, but we know he's not going to be perfect. Every pitcher goes through that. I mean, if it goes for a long period of time, I think you become concerned. But, every pitcher goes through it.
Our colleague Dallas Braden was on Baseball Tonight last night, and he talked about how, in his eyes, the book is out on Masahiro Tanaka.
The book is out. They're not letting him use that secondary repertoire to put him away. They're patient. They're seeing him up in the zone, which is exactly what you want to do when you've got a guy who's got one of these hellacious splitters that he's featuring.
An interesting game last night between the Tigers and the Dodgers. In the top of the first inning, the Dodgers plated 5 runs against Justin Verlander. And after what happened earlier this week to Rick Porcello, I'm sure Tigers fans are thinking, oh boy, not again. But Verlander locked it down from that point on, and the Tigers plated 14 runs to walk away with a victory. Afterward, Verlander talked about how it was nice to hold his team in the game.
The first inning's tough, but as a starting pitcher, you have to have the ability to turn the page, and I was able to do that. And it's nice to get those wins on occasion. You don't want to have them too often. Obviously, they're not going to happen too often, but it's a nice feeling when you're able to go out there and keep your team in the game. When in other times, maybe when I was younger, it turns into a 2-inning. Or 3-inning and 8-run affair instead of being able to grind out 6 innings and keep those guys where they were at and get a chance to get a W.
Another day, another walk-off win for the St. Louis Cardinals. They beat the Pittsburgh Pirates. When Colton Wong hit a walk-off home run, Mike Matheny talked about it after the game.
What a great way to end the game again. But just keep it comes down to the same concept we kept talking about even without the happening in the ninth, just the home runs in general. Guys just put together good at-bats and good things happen. We've seen Colton through some really good stretches, and it looks like he got himself to the point where he feels good physically and able to get through the ball, obviously, and a couple of hard hit balls today. And what a game. I mean, getting us on the board with a couple with 2 outs and driving the ball in the gap, and then obviously the one late. But he's an exciting player to watch.
The Cincinnati Reds had a great day. They won the first game of a doubleheader 4-2 against the Chicago Cubs. In the second game, they actually came from behind. Billy Hamilton with a big hit, a broken back hit for a walk-off victory. And afterward, Brian Price talked about the day.
I don't even know what to say, really. I mean, what a game. I don't know if I've been involved as a manager in a more exciting game. And it just to see the reaction of the players and how fired up the guys are. I mean, it was a big game, a lot of big moments.
The Dodgers placed pitcher Josh Beckett on the disabled list. He's had some pain in his hip. Now, the way this could work out, he really is only going to miss 1 start when you factor in the All-Star break. The Reds officially placed first baseman Joey Votto back on the disabled list. He's having some thigh-type issues or knee-type issues that we talked about on the podcast on Tuesday. The Indians officially placed pitcher Justin Masterson on the disabled list with right knee inflammation. We'll be talking about that in a couple of minutes with Tim Kurkjian. Ricky Nolasco was placed on the disabled list with the dreaded right elbow strain. We'll have to find out in the days ahead exactly how long he'll be out. Cardinals pitcher Jaime Garcia is going to have shoulder surgery on Friday. That's actually his birthday, as our good friend Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch points out. And the home run derby lineups, most of them anyway, have been set. National League captain Troy Tulowitzki has chosen Yasiel Puig, Giancarlo Stanton, and as we heard yesterday from Devin Mesoraco with the Reds, Todd Frazier. American League captain Jose Bautista went with Yoenis Cespedes, Brian Dozier, and Adam Jones. Each of these captains have one more guy to pick. I think in the National League, the expectation is that if Justin Morneau wins the final vote in the National League, that he'll probably be on the Derby team, which would be a lot of fun, given the fact, of course, that the All-Star game is in Minnesota, and that's where Morneau played the majority of his career. Oakland manager Bob Melvin said he has mixed feelings about Cespedes defending his title. His quote was, "You get nervous over the number of swings, but you're also happy they get to compete in it."
Scene heads rejoice.
Nerd alert!
It's Timmy time
Is this a great game or what?
with Tim Kurkjian on Baseball Tonight.
And Tim Kurkjian, of course, covers baseball for ESPN. He is the host of the Seamhead edition of Baseball Tonight, which is on Thursday this week at 8 o'clock. Correct, Tim?
Yes, 2 hours early, so that's great.
Yeah, I'm fired up for that, and I'll see you there tomorrow night. Last night we learned about who's on these home run derby teams, but again we heard from someone in baseball concerned about the home run derby hangover, and it's almost become legend or urban legend, depending on your perspective, because you remember what happened with Bobby Abreu, you remember what has happened in the past with guys like Josh Hamilton. Last night Bob Melvin, the Oakland manager, talked about how he's concerned about the number of swings that Cespedes and others will have to take in the home run derby. And Tim, recently I was talking with a longtime Major League veteran about the home run derby and about whether or not there's a hangover effect, and he just shook his head and grimaced and said, "Come on, that's an excuse. It's not really a hangover. You know, these guys are professionals. They take batting practice every day. You're telling me that an hour of batting practice is going to mess up their swing for the second half?" And this is someone who's been on a lot of teams. He's got a lot of perspective, and he wasn't buying it. Do you believe that there's a home run derby hangover?
No, I don't. Now, first off, if I'm Bob Melvin, I'm saying and doing the exact same thing. It doesn't do my team any good to have any of our guys in the home run derby, okay? And I'm not taking any chances with my guy, okay, because it doesn't serve any purpose for them. Now, for the good of the game, those guys should compete, and I agree with your veteran player. I'm just not buying it. I've watched batting practice, Buster, for 35 years. I've seen guys swing out of their shoes time and time and time again, and then they go into the game and they get 4 hits. I'm just not buying that. Plus, it's a coach or it's your dad throwing 60 miles an hour. It bears no resemblance to the real game. And I know about Bobby Abreu, and I know about Josh Hamilton. I also know it's the hardest game in the world to play, and that anything could throw you off, and I'm just not buying that too many swings in BP is going to do it. Chris Davis didn't have any problem with it last year. I think he had a fabulous second half after having a really good first half. So I think it's more urban legend than anything else, but I can see Bob Melvin's point. Why would I want one of my guys to even take a chance of getting hurt or messing up his swing? But I don't think it does.
We had Devin Mesoraco on the podcast yesterday, and he kind of let the cat out of the bag before the word became official in telling us that Todd Frazier was going to be on the National League Derby team. And I got to say, Tim, I'm really excited to see Yasiel Puig, and I'm curious to see how many times he flips his bat after hitting home runs. And Cespedes is fun to watch. Troy Tulowitzki will be fun to watch. And, of course, the monster of all these guys is Giancarlo Stanton. But I got to tell you, I am so thrilled that Todd Frazier not only is an all-star, but he gets to be on the Derby because I don't think anybody's going to have more fun. That's the name that excited me the most yesterday. How about for you?
Well, Stanton excited me the most, but that's obvious, and I figured he was going to do this, so I wasn't surprised. But I think this is as much about personality, Buster, as it is about power. All of these guys are strong enough to hit a bunch of homers. Nobody's strong enough to put on the show that Stanton is capable of putting on. But Todd Frazier's personality belongs in the home run derby. Even if he hits 2 homers, he'll be hilarious about it. But if he actually wins the thing, or comes close, I think it'll be great having him around. He's such a talkative guy. He's such a fun guy. And he's also a really strong guy who's had a big power year the first half of the season. So he was the guy that I looked at and said, great, he's in. That'll be fun. I also like it that Brian Dozier is in the home run hitting contest because he was a borderline all-star with the Twins. The things in Minneapolis, the guy's a little guy who hits a bunch of homers. He's not, well, let's say he's a shorter guy. He's not a little guy because he is one strong little second baseman. But I like having him in there, too, just because he's a different name, a different face, hometown favorite. I think that's good, too. But to me, it all starts and ends with Giancarlo Stanton.
Our colleague Pedro Gomez speaks Spanish and I don't. And after we got word of the teams yesterday, I sent him an email in which I said, look, you obviously are going to be the one talking with Puig. You're the one talking with Cespedes. Don't even think about talking to Todd Frazier. He's my guy in the home run derby coverage. And so I'll be locked right next to him, right next to Dozier, right next to Stanton, and it should be a lot of fun. I love the home run derby.
And Buster, by the way, I don't speak Spanish either. This is my biggest mistake of my life. It took French in high school and in college, and now that Real Cormier's retired, I don't have anyone to talk to. So that was my big mistake. I should have taken Spanish.
Well, as soon as my son goes off to school, he's 10 years old, so probably in 5 years, I promised myself that's when I'm going to pick up the Spanish that I tried to learn when I was in college and I was such a failure at. Last night we saw Masahiro Tanaka lose to the Cleveland Indians. Our colleague Dallas Braden, we heard from a couple of minutes ago, talking about how he really feels like the league is adjusting to Tanaka. And, Tim, I think this is inevitable that you were going to see this trend because he had thrown such a high percentage of splitters with 2 strikes that eventually you knew that opposing hitters were going to say, look, with 2 strikes, we assume that there's a good chance he's going to throw a splitter, so we're just going to lay off that pitch. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And I'm sure you've seen the notes about how Tanaka's numbers have gone down in 2-strike situations. And so now the next adjustment's going to be his. And I presume what you may see is him either attack more with fastballs or attack more with sliders with 2 strikes. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. As you know, Buster, 3 home runs allowed last night on 2-strike count. And he didn't allow any home runs on a 2-strike count in his first 14 games. So this may support exactly what you're saying. But I told you that story about Brian LaHare, who played in Japan last year, how Tanaka just threw him splitters, and Brian LaHare looked at him like, I'm not swinging at that. And Tanaka looked at him like, you're not going to swing at that? All right, I have plenty of other things to get you out with. And then he blew him away with 3 fastballs. That's what he is capable of doing. And, yes, I think Dallas Braden is right. And that at some point the hitters say, okay, I've seen him now a couple times. Maybe we can figure it out this time around. But I don't think he's going to get pounded this time around. But really smart pitchers make the adjustment to the hitters. And that's precisely what he will do. Maybe he won't go 12-2 with a ERA just over 2 the second half, but I just refuse to believe that, they got him figured out, and now they're going to start hitting him. I'm not buying that. He's too smart for that.
Too smart and too competitive, without a doubt. I've been talking in the last couple of weeks how I think the negotiations between Jon Lester and the Red Sox are all but over, unless the Red Sox completely capitulate in the way that the Philadelphia Phillies did a couple of years ago with Cole Hamels. If you remember, Cole Hamels was in his last months before free agency. The Phillies had waited and waited and waited. They had offered him $80 million the previous fall, and they wound up giving him $144 million, an increase in their offer by only 80% in 9 months because they realized, oh, my God, this guy's going to become a free agent. And I think unless the Red Sox follow the same approach that the Phillies did, which is okay, never mind, forget that low offer we made. We'll give you what you want because we really need you. I don't think Jon Lester's coming back. And I think there's a real chance that he's going to wind up with another team next year, whether it's the San Francisco Giants or whether it's Chicago Cubs and Theo Epstein. This has really surprised me because I got to believe that the first question being asked in the Red Sox baseball operations department is, my God, if this guy leaves, who are we going to replace him with, especially playing in the American League East where Jon Lester has experience? What's your sense of the Lester negotiations?
Well, Buster, I've said at least a dozen times here publicly that there's simply no way the Red Sox can let him get away for precisely what you just said. If they trade Jake Peavy and Clay Buchholz isn't himself, and they have other potentials, and John Lackey's going to move into the last year of a deal, how can you not keep Jon Lester? And I believe that 100% until Monday when I was checking around with some people, and somebody who would know told me, don't be surprised if Lester moves on and the Red Sox don't re-sign him. It's the first time, Monday, that I actually thought, oh, my goodness, he might not be going back to Boston. And I think that would be obviously a huge story. He's not going to take a hometown discount. He's going to want an enormous amount of money. And it's not that the Red Sox can't afford it, but I was told, they've had enough. They know too well about 7, 8-year deals from, what other teams have done, and they're just not willing to go down that road. So, again, 2 days ago was the first time I thought he might not be going back to Boston, and at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up with another team next year.
Yeah, and I agree with you about 7 or 8 year deals, and the Yankee situation with CeCe Sabathia is a classic example of that, where, we're 5 years into that, year 6 of that, and it looks like that CeCe might actually be worth more to the Yankees if he's not able to pitch again than if he comes back and pitches. So you understand that concern, but boy, I think the Red Sox will be ripe for some serious criticism if Lester leaves, because I do believe that in spring training he would have done a deal for, and I've heard this from people around him, he would have done a deal for like 5 years and $110 million. There was a mid-level deal to be made there as opposed to the high-end deal like Max Scherzer turned down. And I think if Lester leaves, I'm going to put a lot of blame on the Red Sox. What about you?
Yeah, I'm stunned it's even gotten to this point. And again, I'm not positive he's going anywhere, but I think the Red Sox would have to look at this and say, well, maybe we should have moved a little quicker on this, or been a little stronger, or gone a little more than $70 million in our last offer. But they're going to have a hard time justifying that if, let's say, they finish in last place and they lose their best pitcher. Now, I know they have young kids coming. I know the future of the organization is still going to be very bright no matter what with the people and the resources they have. But it is going to be extremely difficult to justify letting him get away when I don't see a number one, even close to a number one on their staff right now.
Real quick, I know you saw the Indians recently, and one of the guys, as we went into the winter last year, that we were thinking was going to be one of the prime free agents was Justin Masterson. And, boy, you talk about not having it pan out as opposed to Lester's having the best season of his career. What did you learn about Masterson when you were out there around the Indians, especially given the fact that he was just placed on the disabled list?
Yeah, he's in big trouble, Buster, and therefore so are the Indians for making the playoffs. So the way Corey Kluber has thrown the ball this year, if Masterson was the Masterson of last season, I think they would be a strong playoff contender. But Masterson isn't even close to the guy he was last year. And I'm telling you, Buster, he has struggled so badly. The second inning and the first two batters of the third inning that I saw the other night, apparently that's been happening the last 3 times out. He can't throw the ball over the plate. He can't get the ball on the inside part of the plate. It looks like he's pitching scared, is lack of a better term. And they put him on the DL. He's had a bit of a knee injury, but I talked to him after the game, and we asked him if his knee was hurting. He said, no, I'm really okay. And they disabled him anyway because they need to get him out of the rotation and figure out what in the heck is wrong with him. I mean, this is a guy who threw 25 consecutive strikes in one start this year. It struck out the side on 9 pitches, and he wasn't even close the other day. And his velocity is down, and of course there are concerns that, he this doesn't bother him enough when he pitches poorly because he's the world's nicest kid. But they have a lot of work to do right now with Justin Masterson to get him straightened out. And I'm just amazed anyone with stuff as good as his can now have a regression of that stuff and just an inability to throw the ball where he wants to right now.
Our colleague Gordon Eads was the first to report that the St. Louis Cardinals are taking a hard look at Jake Peavy as they look to fill in the gaps in their rotation. We know the Red Sox season's fallen apart. Peavy told reporters after the game last night that he has spoken with general manager Ben Cherington about the possibility he's going to get traded. And Tim, I talked to Peavy the last time we had the Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball, about 10 days ago, and he basically indicated to me that he really feels like he's right on the cusp of getting right. We know that he struggled, and I know from talking with Red Sox people that they felt like that there were adjustments to be made with him. Earlier in the year, he pitched through some physical trouble, and he was struggling, but now he feels like he's just about back. And I got to believe that this is someone, given how competitive he is and how much experience he has, that he could help a National League team like the Cardinals, or maybe like the Dodgers, who just placed Josh Beckett on the disabled list, or maybe like the Giants, who are having some issues at the back end of their rotation. I got to believe that Peavy would be someone, especially since the Red Sox have made it clear to other teams who are willing to eat money, that this is going to be an attractive guy.
Yeah, I think he is. And remember what Rick Sutcliffe told us basically at this time last year. If the Red Sox get Jake Peavy, he is going to help pitch them to the World Championship. And then he did. Now, he wasn't the most vital guy on the team, but Sutcliffe was right. And he basically said the same thing the other day, that Jake Peavy in a pennant race is a slightly better pitcher than Jake Peavy is normally because he is so wildly competitive, and he loves pitching in those pressurized games. But this would make all the sense in the world for the Cardinals to bring an older pitcher in there to go with Adam Wainwright to make sure the Shelby Millers have a little bit of pressure taken off of them, perhaps. Jaime Garcia's out for the season. So I think this would be a good move for the Cardinals. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they made this deal because, again, they're in a spot where Pirates are charging, the Reds are charging, the Brewers are in first place. Cardinals have to make the playoffs. They have to do something in the playoffs. And if Jake Peavy can help, I think they'll turn around and do something there.
If you were in the position that the Rays are in now, as they're clearly evaluating whether or not to trade David Price, they almost traded him to Oakland last week in a deal for Addison Russell, but Oakland preferred the Chicago offer. Would you trade David Price between now and the trade deadline?
Well, this is a hard one, Buster. No, I would not trade him if I still had a chance to make the playoffs. Now, again, it's a tough chance given where they are in the standings, given their record and everything else. But if I have a chance to win, I have to take it this year. It's like Earl Weaver always told me, if you have a chance to win this year, you have to try to win this year. Then you figure out next year. So I think if they have a chance, they won't trade him, and I wouldn't trade him. He's the hottest pitcher in the league, and I would ride him until we're out of the race. Unless, of course, Buster, somebody comes along and gives the Rays exactly what they want for David Price, and then they would have every right to say, okay, we're never going to re-sign you. We have to get the most we can get for you. This is the most we will ever get for you, so we have to do it now. But that hasn't happened. And unless it does, I would hang on to him and try to win. But if they lose 10 in a row, he's got to go no matter what before July 31st.
Yeah, you mentioned what Earl Weaver said. It actually was parallel to what I wrote about this morning in the column, which was about the Oakland Athletics. And I looked up this record, and I think it's this Samardzija trade that they made recently gives us an opportunity to maybe appreciate the Athletics for the work that they've done essentially over the last 2 decades. Because, look, Addison Russell, when you talk to people around baseball, they say he looks like a solid bet to be a really great major leaguer. One of the comparisons I heard was to Barry Larkin, for example. But on the other hand, the Oakland Athletics, again, looked at the landscape of their division, looked at their starting pitching, could see some of the cracks developing, and went out and made an aggressive trade to win now. And I looked it up this morning, Tim, and I was aware of this, but not fully until I looked at it year by year. It's been 17 years since the Oakland Athletics have won fewer than 17 games, okay? they haven't had any of the strategy of, you know what, let's have design failure and finish last year after year after year, so we get a lot of draft picks at the top of the draft, so we're in a position to collect a lot of talent, so we might win in 4 or 5 years. They try to win every year, and if they win the American League West this year, it'll be their 3rd straight division title. They certainly have the team that could compete for a 4th straight division title next year, and yet they've always been at the bottom of payrolls all around baseball, and I find myself amazed at what they do, and I really think that that's the art form, is to try to take what you have, the resources you have, and try to win, as opposed to this whole thing of, you know what, we're just going to lay back, we'll pick at the top of the draft and collect a lot of young players, and we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Right. Well, this is why we all have to admire how the A's are doing this. And I love the trade they made for those 2 pitchers because, again, even though they're the little small market Oakland A's, they can't get knocked out in the 1st round again by Justin Verlander and the Tigers. They have to get over that. And maybe Jeff Samardzija and maybe Jason Hamill can help them do that. And I really admire the A's for moving top young players along in order to win now. You know, we trash teams for not doing enough. We can't trash them for doing too much. And again, they gave up some good young kids in that. And Earl Weaver, not to quote him again, but he said, give me all the shortstops you can. I'd draft them all because we'll all turn them into other positions. They're the best athletes on the field. That's why the Cubs made this trade. They can play Castro and Addison Russell at the same time, somehow, somewhere, with Javi Baez, somewhere, if they do it properly. But, again, I love teams that go for it, and the A's are going for it, and whether they make it or not, it's not that it's irrelevant, but you can't trash them for saying we're trying to win the World Series here. That's the right thing to do.
22 days left until the trade deadline. I personally think the team in most need of the upgrade, and I say that in respect to where they stand and how good they might be. For me, it's the Angels, because I look at this team and think, you know what, if they solve the back end of their bullpen, and last week they picked up Jason Grilli, they made the trade for Joe Thatcher, I talked to Jerry Dipoto, their general manager, they're trying to fix the bullpen. If they fix that, that to me is a team that could win the World Series. So I think between now and July 31st, whether it's Grilli or Houston Street or somebody else, that to me is the team right now in most need of picking up a guy. What about for you?
Well, I think it's Toronto because the Blue Jays are in trouble all of a sudden with injuries to Encarnacion and with pitching issues, and they haven't been to the playoffs since 1993, and they got everyone excited up there, and now they're starting to fade, and the Orioles are starting to charge, and there are all sorts of teams around them. I think they're going to have to do something to make the playoffs. Now, I thought Samardzija would be a guy that could really help them. Of course he could have. I just don't know if they had the right package, but they have to do something here if they're going to make the playoffs, because I think the way they're fading right now, I don't think they're going to make it unless they go get somebody. I agree with you. The Angels could make a major upgrade and win the World Series. The Blue Jays are in a position where they have to make a major upgrade just to make the playoffs. And I think they have to with the start they got off to and as excited as they got everyone. I think they will do something. I'm just wondering if it's going to be enough.
All right, Tim. Well, I will see you tomorrow night. Again, 8 o'clock for the Seamhead version of Baseball Tonight. And travel safe.
Okay, Buster, my favorite night of the week. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Corey Kluber pitches for the Cleveland Indians. He's also one of those being considered for Major League Baseball's final vote in the American League. You can identify him on Twitter under hashtag #VoteKluber. And Corey, I was going to ask you about it. It's very interesting, watching the different approaches with the different teams, with the different candidates. And it seems that the Indians' approach is to have you in some form or fashion superimposed, have your head superimposed on the body of various superheroes or people in different pictures. Have you seen many of those?
I've seen some of them, yeah. People were texting me a couple pictures or texting my wife a couple pictures on Sunday night when they started doing stuff, so I've seen a couple of them. Pretty.
Which ones cracked you up the most?
I don't know if I have a favorite. I think her favorite was the one with the, I don't know if you've seen it or not, the one with the my face on the body of some guy giving a polar bear a hug. So.
Yeah, that's exactly the one that made me laugh the most. Now, are you having fun with this?
Yeah, I mean it's great. It's a little different for me getting all the attention and stuff, but I appreciate the lengths that the organization and teammates and stuff are going through, and fans and all that kind of thing.
What type of stuff are you doing this week as part of this?
Trying to stay out of the way. Not really a big self-promoter, so I'm just kind of going about my business as usual and letting the people that want to do stuff for it go about it however they want and stuff. And if I can help them out, then that's great. But I'm not gonna campaign for myself or anything like that.
Now, when these teams came out the other day, were you surprised, disappointed when you heard you weren't on the initial team?
No, not at all. I mean, I think just even the way I look at it is just even being in that final vote is an honor. If you look at the guys that are already on the team, I'm not sure who you could try to say that I should be on there instead of those guys are all great pitchers, and then same thing with the other 4 guys that are in the final vote. They're great pitchers. They're having outstanding years and stuff. So just even be mentioned with them is an honor in my mind.
So far for you this year, 2.86 ERA, 19 starts, 137 strikeouts, and 125 and 2/3 innings. And you've had an interesting history because you were initially drafted by the San Diego Padres, traded over to the Indians, and then the last couple of years you've taken a big jump forward. What's been the key for that to happen?
I think towards the last couple of months of 2012, getting a chance to come up here and pitch every 5th day and kind of get into the routine and learn how to pitch to big league hitters and stuff like that. It helped me out a lot, and it gave me confidence. I didn't have great results then, but I showed flashes to myself that I was capable of pitching to guys up here, getting outs, that kind of thing. And so I think I've just kind of carried that confidence throughout since then, and it's worked out well for me.
Can you give me a couple of examples of different things you learned in that first time as part of the Indians rotation?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I did wrong at the very beginning, at least for me, was you get so much information up here and things like that I almost I didn't know any better because you don't have all that information in AAA or whatnot, and so I almost took too much information about other hitters and things like that to where it kind of got me focusing more on what a hitter does or doesn't do instead of concentrating on what I need to do to be successful. Ultimately, for me at least, my game plan is going to be to go out there and pitch my game, not pitch according to whoever's in the batter's box, and that's what allows me to be the most successful. And I think early on I kind of got caught up in focusing more on the opposing hitters instead of myself. And so that's just something I've kind of learned over time is to, obviously you get scouting reports and you want to know what hitters' tendencies are and stuff, but in the end, always falling back to what you do and what you want to do.
I always feel like that one of the cool things about baseball is so much of the success is actually built on failure. And for example, I remember CC Sabathia telling me about a game that he pitched against the Cubs in which he really realized after he came off the mound, after he was pulled and had a lousy outing, that he had lost his focus. And he made up his mind, I'm never going to let that happen again. Can you remember a specific game in that first year in which you felt like, you know what, I focused too much on the scouting information and the information about the hitters rather than what I do well?
I remember a game early on last year when I pitched against Detroit. Right after I got called back up, it was one of the first few games I pitched back up here, and I remember it's kind of one of those moments like you were saying CeCe had. I wasn't with focus, but I remember getting done with the game, and I remember thinking to myself there was probably at least a handful of situations out there where in my mind I wanted to throw a pitch. The catcher called a different pitch, and I went along with that instead of going with my instinct, what I wanted to throw, throwing it with conviction, all that kind of thing. And I bet if I went back and looked at it, those instances where that happened probably didn't pan out too well for me. And I remember talking to Kevin Cash, our bullpen coach, about it the next day, and he told me, make a promise to yourself right now, don't ever let that happen again. You throw what you want to throw, you call your game, that kind of thing. And that it was one of those things, it kind of clicked to me, like, yeah, I mean, the catchers know what they're doing out there, but ultimately you're the one with the ball, and if it's not something that you want to throw, your likelihood of getting good results with it are going to decrease.
Corey, as you know, different pitchers have different processes leading into the game in terms of developing scouting report. A.J. Ellis and Clayton Kershaw have basically told me that Kershaw dictates all the scouting information in their meeting. The other day, Jose Molina told me that he and David Price don't even talk before it starts. On the other hand, Roger Clemens loved to get into it with the catcher and really go back and forth in terms of having good discussions about how to pitch. How do you go into a game in your scouting meeting with a catcher before a game?
Usually Jon and I rely mostly on the advanced meeting that we have before a series where, the whole staff goes over pitchers, or over hitters, sorry. And, we get our scouting reports for them during that. And then if there's something different from that we want to do, we'll just kind of, catch each other throughout the day when we're walking around before we head out there and, make a quick mention of it. Or we do, I'd say more so than before the game, we do more adjusting during the game, whereas if he sees something from behind the hitter, if I think I notice something they're trying to do with their approach that might be a little different than what we had going into it originally, we'll kind of adjust on the fly sort of thing. But, we don't sit down for a hitter-by-hitter meeting the day I pitch or anything like that. Like I said, we just kind of rely on that beginning of the series meeting that we have where we go over everybody.
Where do you see the Indians as they stand right now and how you guys are playing in the American League Central race?
I think despite our inconsistencies, you could say, so far, I think we're still in the thick of things, and that's probably a good sign that we haven't played ourselves out of it yet. I think that we all feel like we are a better team than we've showed on a consistent basis so far this year. I think we've shown flashes of how good we can be. I think it's a matter of us stringing it together for longer periods of time than we've been able to so far, and kind of avoiding the downs or the lulls, so to speak. I think we all have confidence that we can do that. We showed that we can do it at the end of last year, and we got a lot of the same guys here, so we have that belief in ourselves that once we do get everything clicking and we can get on that roll, that hopefully things will turn out in our favor.
From the outside looking in, I thought that your success against the Tigers this year, which you guys didn't have a lot of last year, might be important as we head into the second half. What do you think?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's last year obviously doesn't have any bearing on this year. I think somebody asked me that question before we played them the first time this year. If our struggles against them last year were going to, put more pressure on playing them this year, that kind of thing. But I'm pretty sure if you look back in 2012, we had a really good record against them, and then obviously the tables turned last year. So from year to year, it doesn't necessarily correlate. I think we've played pretty well against them thus far. I think that's our hope, to continue to do that, and probably against everybody in the division. That's where you got so many divisional games coming up in the second half. There's a chance to make up some ground there.
Hey, Corey, good luck with the final vote, and hopefully you'll see you in Minneapolis next week.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Joba Chamberlain pitches for the Detroit Tigers. He's having a fine first season with Detroit at 2.86 ERA, 38 games in. Joba, the other day, we were in Brad Ausmus's office when we were getting ready for Sunday Night Baseball, and he mentioned that all year you've been like the sure thing that he reaches for in the bullpen. And I remember the last time I talked to you, you were telling me about sort of how the seeds of this season were planted during the offseason because you made up your mind to do something different with your slider. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I decided to start throwing it early. It's usually one of the last pitches I start to throw. When I start playing catch, get extended play and long toss, and then, throw my curveball and fastball and changeup, and sliders usually last. But, my arm felt great, and obviously coming off 2 years of Tommy John, I felt like it was something that I needed to do. I walked too many people last year, and just my slider was very, very inconsistent. And just started playing catch with it as soon as I felt like my arm was in shape to do it, and I think it's really paid off.
Now, the other day when I looked across the clubhouse, you were there in the midst of about 6 different people. It was almost like you were holding court. You were right in the center of them. And I remember when I heard that you were going to sign with the Tigers, I was thinking, boy, that's a great group of guys. for Joba to join because you have really good people, solid veterans. Tell me what the Tigers clubhouse is like.
Yeah, it's great. It's just a bunch of kids playing a game. And obviously they keep it between the lines. It's very professional, and they get after it, and they want to win hard. But as soon as the game's over, it seems like everybody keeps everything in perspective. Obviously, we're a young, old team. A lot of guys have been around, but we're not very old. And just being able to separate those two, obviously we've gone through some stretches that have been really good. We've gone through some stretches where we've been pretty bad. And, just the demeanor of everybody never changed. And you couldn't tell if we had just lost 5 in a row or we won 5 in a row. And I think, that just continued success from that point on is just the demeanor has been unbelievable. And it's never a panic zone. And, just a lot of guys just have fun. And it's definitely fun to be in.
Can you give me a couple of examples of that you've seen this year? Teammates who maybe had a tough outing and then you saw them after the game or the next day?
Yeah, I can remember when we had, we just lost our last 2 games on the road trip, and we went 7-2 on the road trip, and Miggy, everybody's getting dressed, and he's like, forget it, we had a great road trip. Everybody's kind of bummed we lost the last one, but he's like, we went 7-2, that's a great road trip, and during the struggles of that month we had were terrible, and everybody's just like, forget it, what are we going to do? We're going to be stronger for it, and there was never a panic. I remember just Corey was like, hey, what are we going to do? We can't change what happened. We just got to get better. And obviously it turned around for us. It's just those little things that usually you hear panic and you see panic on people's faces and the way they go about their business. But, just seeing those 2 little things is just a reminder of the respect that these guys keep and why they've been so successful for the last few years.
And, of course, you've been competing against these guys for years, and I'm curious about your impressions in being around guys for the first time on a daily basis and what you learned about them that you didn't know before. So I'm going to throw some names at you and get some of those impressions that you've had. Justin Verlander.
I got to know Justin actually pretty well over the last few years. It's just, the dude is meticulous about everything. And, perfection I don't think is a word for Justin. He tries to go above and beyond that. And, just to see the work they do on the video and scouting reports and, just to see every time he wants the ball, he wants to go 9 innings, and it's something special, and it's definitely fun to see, and it's definitely fun to be on the other side of the ball and not on the losing end most of the time.
What about Max Scherzer?
I've played against Max in college, and then obviously seeing him come up, and just he's one of those guys who's such a numbers guy, such a just percentage guys of swings when they're not going to swing, pitches to throw, and just. You obviously don't get to see that, just playing against him, but, seeing the work that he does as far as the numbers, and, he can go ahead and tell you a first pitch swing percentage of what it was last year compared to this year, the differences, and I think it's just those little things that he keys in on swings that are very, very important.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I tell people all the time, on the hitter's side, the guy who talks like that is Joey Votto of the Reds. He processes all that information where when I talk to Miguel Cabrera about hitting, he's like, I don't even want to know the scouting information. I just want to react to what I see. And I remember talking with Max in spring training, and he's quoting all those numbers along with first pitch strike percentages. And I think most pitchers probably don't even want to know that stuff. They'd rather just do what they do as opposed to looking at those numbers. What about you?
Yeah, I'm not a numbers guy. I can't think too much when I start getting in my own head and get going, but Max is a numbers guy through and through with everything that he does, and I think, obviously he's one of those guys where he loves that information. I think it helps him, and me, personally, I definitely don't look at those. I definitely don't look at scouting reports just as far as I can't go away from my strengths. One of my weaknesses could be one of his strengths and vice versa and going. So I don't want to get out of my own game plan, so I kind of really just try to stay with what working and how I feel.
Joe Nathan.
Man, just incredible work ethic. Obviously going in, seeing the saves that he's had and everything that he's done. He's my catch partner, and I think since day one of spring training, there's 3 or 4 days that we haven't played long toss. So we're always making sure we get our stuff in. And usually long toss is a couple days a week, but Joe's out there every day. And, obviously I got to make sure that he doesn't show me up being 39 and I'm only 28. So I got to be out there with him every day doing that stuff. So just his work ethic is tremendous, and just the way he goes about his business, whether it's good or bad, it's pretty fun to see.
He's, of course, the all-time leader in saves among active pitchers. Last year, that guy was Mariano Rivera, who was your longtime teammate. How are they similar, Joba, and what makes those guys unique as closers?
I mean, they're so similar in so many ways, and they're so different. I think it's just the consistency as far as just the day in and day out routine of no matter if they blew a save, they got a save, it's just the same every day. Just the schedule and just the monotony of that every day is fun to see. Just the long toss no matter what, the flat gun when you need it, the running, the lifting. Just there's never a lull in, when he comes to the bullpen. It's never early, it's never late. It's always on the same time. Mo is the same way. It didn't matter, if he blew a save or whatever. He was still doing his stuff, came out at the same time, got a massage at the same time. And I think that just the similarities as far as that goes, not changing whether it's good or bad, is pretty incredible.
Joba, when I saw you in the first days of the Tigers camp this spring, the Tigers were in the midst of this fielding competition, and you came out as the champion in this. In the way that Brad Ausmus has described to me, it's almost like the 16th seed winning the NCAA tournament. Tell me about that. What was it exactly? I'm trying to remember exactly the details of it, but I remember you were so fired up when you won the thing.
Yeah, it was a PFP drill because as we all know, as pitchers in spring training were there early, and PFPs can get kind of boring. So we had a rag ball tournament to where Matt Martin and Omar Vizquel would hit balls at us, and we had to keep them in front, knock them down, do anything we could. And I guess they put me at the 16th seed. There was a couple balls I just bodied up. I didn't even try to catch, so they said I should have put a hockey goalie stuff on. But it's, as the new guy coming in, you kind of want to make a good first impression. Obviously, being around for a little. But it was it definitely was fun to win that one the first thing and get started off on the right foot, and I definitely celebrated a little bit.
Joba, what do you see ahead for the Tigers?
Just obviously finishing the first half strong. Obviously where we want to be in first place, and I think the thing for us is we can definitely play better. I mean, we can play more consistent. We've obviously gone through some bumps, but I think it's just the demeanor of this team and the maturity and the experience of this team can only lead us in one direction, and that's, to be successful. Obviously, second half, you get these 4 days where you can kind of erase the first half and finish strong. And I think there's so many guys that are having great years that are going to continue to have great years, and some guys that are going to have great second halves. And I just think from top to bottom, this team is going to continue to get better, and good things are going to come at the end of September, beginning of October.
Joba, the pride of Nebraska, thanks for doing this.
Oh, Buster, always a pleasure.
One last thing.
We talked in the past about how, as a journalist, you don't really root for teams. You're not, rooting for clubs in the way that you did as a kid. I was a Dodger fan as a kid, and I was crazy about them, rabid about their success. But once you get into it, you root more for people. And one of the guys that's been fun to watch this year is Billy Hamilton of the Cincinnati Reds, because he had such a struggle at the beginning of the year, and the projections for him were so low because he had such a low on-base percentage in the minor leagues last year. But the thing is that he's a guy who, as we talked about, has this relentless optimism. He believes he's going to get better. And, boy, month by month, he just gets better and better and better. Had that walk-off hit last night. And you look at his OPS month to month. In April, 636. In May, 652. In June, 848. In July, 859. And, Josh, I was looking at Fangraphs today and looking at the leaders in WAR.
Yep.
As of this morning, Mr. Billy Hamilton ranks 18th in all the major leagues in WAR. I think I'm trying to remember the player that he's right behind. Oh, he's right behind Miguel Cabrera in wins above replacement in baseball. And no one's ever going to suggest that anything close to Cabrera as a hitter. But between the defense and the base running and the improvement as a hitter, man, he really is becoming an impact-type player.
Yeah, not too shabby. And I don't think it's coincidental that he had such a great day on the same day we had one of his teammates, Devin Mesoraco, on the podcast on Tuesday. I think the Baseball Tonight podcast brings some good luck to some of these clubs.
We've seen that time and again.
We really have.
Worth remembering going forward. That's it for today. My thanks to Corey Kluber, Joba Chamberlain, and Tim Kurkjian, and to Josh Macri, who produced this podcast. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Baseball Tonight podcast. If you're playing fantasy baseball, don't forget to listen to the Fantasy Focus podcast. Check out all podcasts at ESPN.com/PodCenter. Baseball Tonight, the podcast.
The next big thing, the next new kid, the next overnight sensation, the next rookie, one to watch, the next Hall of Famer, the next intimidator, the next six-time, the next king. Next. Who's next? Let's find out. Names are made here. The NASCAR Nationwide Series at New Hampshire, Saturday at 3 Eastern on ESPN2.